Now that you're all sitting comfortably, let's all stand up. I'm going to ask you to repeat after me. If you have a paper Bible, hold it up. If you have your Bible on your phone, hold that up and just repeat after me. This is my Bible. It is the Word of God. I'll believe it. I'll receive it. I am what it says I am. I can do what it says I can do. And I'll become what it says I'll become. In the name of the Son, by the power of the Spirit, for the glory of the Father. Amen. You can be seated. Wow. Worship. So I'm just going to say this is a preference, not a doctrine. But, you know, when Moses entered the presence of God in the form of the burning bush, God said, "This is holy ground. Take your shoes off." So when I'm in worship, I choose to take my shoes off. Not doctrine, just a personal preference. But I just felt, yeah, I'm going to do that today while I'm here because the presence of God is here, and if it's not here, then I don't really want to be here anyway. I hope you feel the same way. So anyway, yeah. We've been doing a series on the life of Jacob. Last half of Genesis basically is about the story of Jacob. And Sean asked me to talk about Jacob's 11th son, Joseph. And at first I went, oh, that's so cool. I get to talk about Joseph. And then I read and read and read. I was like, dude, this is 10 chapters. I'm not going to get through this in 30, 40, 50, 60 minutes. 70. I hope you're comfortable. But Joseph, like Jacob, Sean said it a few times. Jacob's spiritual life is a dumpster fire, right? He's up, he's down, he's a mess, he's getting it together. It's like, oh my gosh. Joseph is kind of the opposite. And today we're going to talk about a little bit about how he got there and what he did in the course of his life. If you read all of those chapters, that's like 10 chapters. And that's the story. And I hope you have read it. And when I was thinking about this, I was thinking, okay, everybody knows the story of Joseph. That's like the favorite Sunday school story ever. And I thought, well, maybe not everybody's been to Sunday school. So we're going to start just by talking about the life of Joseph. And there's a couple ways to approach it. One way is, and this is very common, right? In the Bible, there are things called types of Jesus, right? We're all focused on Jesus, but there are characters in the Old Testament who reflect the life of Jesus, and Joseph is definitely one of those. That's not what we're doing today. We're not focusing on how he was like Jesus, although he was. We'll see some of that. What I felt as I was meditating on this and rereading it is, let's just tell the story. Let's talk through his story. What was he like? Let's go, because there's some high points here. And we're going to talk about those. You know, he was the youngest son for a long time. If you read, it's in Genesis 35, actually. His younger brother, full brother, remember Jacob had like 4 wives, children with all of them. So Joseph only had one full brother, and that was Benjamin. Estimates are Joseph was probably 12 to 15 when Benjamin was born. So for a big chunk of his youth, he was the youngest child, right? And then when his brother was born, his mother died right after Benjamin was born. So suddenly his mother is gone. He's got this little baby brother, and he's been the youngest. Oh, and by the way, his father was a very wealthy man. Like by any standards, his father was really rich. You know, and their standard of wealth in the day was either land or cattle. cattle, sheep, goats, camels, whatever, and Jacob had a lot of them. So let's go to, so I think very much in visual terms. Actually, let's go to the next slide, Ryan. So by the way, there is a movie. It's a kid's movie, so you watch it with your kids, although Siobhan tells me when she watched it as a kid, it took her years to watch it again because it was a little scary, so, Anyway, but the book is better. We got to say that because the author's here today. So Joseph is sold into slavery by his own brothers. We're going to talk about that. He has this miraculous rise to power, which is... it could only be a God thing, right? And then God works through him to save an entire nation, the nation of Egypt, the surrounding nations, and his family from a famine. And then ultimately, he has the grace to forgive his brothers. He really responds with extraordinary grace in contrast to pretty much his entire family. So as I was thinking about this, how do I do this? I'm a pretty visual guy, so I put it in a timeline. So let's look at that, and we're just going to talk about this from this way. I hope it's not as visible as I hoped. Oh well. The Bible tells us he lived 110 years, and he was 17 years old when his brothers sold him into slavery. Why would they do that? Well, as I said, he was the youngest son of a very wealthy man. May have been a little bit spoiled. In fact, we know he was spoiled because his father gives him this ornate, elaborate coat full of colors, and it's a gorgeous thing that none of his brothers got. All 10 of his older brothers. And then he has these dreams. And these dreams, he says, hey, we were preparing wheat in the field, and suddenly all of your stalks of wheat bowed down to mine. And they're like, dude, really? And so then there's this incident where his father, so his father sends him to watch after the older brothers, right? So the older brothers, remember, the family wealth is livestock. So what are they doing? They're taking care of livestock. These guys work hard. They're out in the field. They are, they're scattered all over because you can't have them all in one place because they're going to graze off the land and then it'll be barren and all that. So they've got some here, some there, and he says, Jacob says to Joseph, hey, go check on your brothers. What does Joseph do? He puts on the coat. And he goes off into the wilderness. His brothers are out there in like jeans and t-shirt, probably have cigarettes rolled up in the sleeve. These are working guys, right? And Joseph shows up, taking care of dad's sheep. So when he's talking about his dreams and he's talking about this, at best, he was unwise. At worst, he was an arrogant little snot. Given the violence of his brother's reaction, I'm guessing he leaned much more towards the latter. Because his brother said, he's out here, dad's not around, let's kill him. This is not a normal reaction to your little brother, even when he's spoiled. So it's interesting, and I'm going to touch on Judah. Judah says, the brothers capture him, throw him in a pit, and say, what are we going to do with him? Let's kill him. Judah says, wait. We could make some money off of this. Hey, dudes, let's sell him to the slave traders. Great idea. So they do this. They literally sell their brother to slave traders, and then they come up with this scheme. They go, hey, we can't just tell dad what we did. So we're going to take that coat, we're going to rip it in shreds, we're going to put some animal's blood on it, and we take it to dad and say, hey, do you recognize this? And of course, Jacob is devastated, right? This is his favorite son, and as far as he can tell, he's dead. He is sure his son is dead. Now, one of the things here is family patterns, right? The father's playing favorites, just like his father. The sons are scheming to steal stuff from the favored son, just like their father. This whole thing keeps getting passed down. In the modern world, we call this toxic behavior, right? It's like, what's going on here? They're living in this bubble. Somehow they've gotten into this thing where deception, favoritism, this is just a way of life. And Joseph, of course, is growing up in the middle of this. What do we think he's likely to turn out like? So God takes drastic action. So suddenly, he's a slave. He is 17 years old. This is what the timeline means here, right? So he's Jacob's favorite. His brothers come up with this idea. Judah says, let's sell him as a slave. So at 17 years old, he's taken to a foreign country, and he's a slave. And he's sold to this guy named Potiphar. Potiphar is captain of the Pharaoh's guard. So he's pretty high up there, apparently, like in the royal court, an important dude. And Joseph, I'm going to get those two wrong all day. I did it when I was practicing. Just know what I'm talking about, okay? You're good. Or who I'm talking about. So Joseph is a slave. And there's nuance to slavery, right? And you start researching slavery in the ancient world, and you could be like, what the technical term, chattel slavery. You are property. You have no hope. You are owned by somebody. Then there are slaves who you could work your way out of this if you can find a way to save some money on the side. There are ways out of it. And then there's like time-bound slavery. And if you read in the law, like somewhere in Leviticus, I think, if a Jew got into debt, got into hard times, he could sell himself as a slave, and it would be, okay, you're going to serve for 7 years, or you're going to serve till the next year of Jubilee, and then you'll be free again, and you can get back on your feet, right? So there's nuance to this. Seems like what Joseph was experiencing was somewhere in the middle, right? He was owned, he was a slave, but he could probably work his way out of it, and he's going, okay, maybe I can get out of this if I just work hard for Potiphar. I mean, we're in the social circles. He's kind of wealthier, status. Maybe I can work my way out of this. I think this is probably what's going on in his mind. This is Jeff speculating. This is not in the Bible, by the way. So he ultimately spends 13 years as a slave. Think about that. I mean, when I think about that, it's like, what? How would I respond? Short answer, not well. But just to be a slave. But I think he's got this idea, like, maybe I can work my way out of this. So he works hard. He works for Potiphar. We're going to see a little later. He works his way up. He becomes Potiphar's head of household. He runs the household. He's doing well as a slave. And then suddenly he is falsely accused. And by the way, all the references are here. Take a picture. Read it for yourself. Fact check me, please. But he's falsely accused by Potiphar's wife. She says, oh, he tried to rape me. He gets thrown in the dungeon. So he goes from being a slave in kind of a high status household to a dungeon. Now, if you're a slave in a dungeon, it's probably not possible to go much further down on the social ladder. I mean, really, he has hit rock bottom. And yet, in the midst of that, he works hard. He works for the head of the dungeon. He becomes the guy who runs the dungeon, literally. It says, and we'll see it later, the specific verse, it says that he didn't worry about it. The head of the dungeon didn't worry about it. He left it in Joseph's hands. He took care of it. But effectively, this is, if you're a slave, you're thrown in there, you're required to work. This is basically life without parole. And this is work till you die. He's in there. I don't know how he kept going. But one day, it says Pharaoh's cupbearer and Pharaoh's baker are thrown in the dungeon. And they're in there for a while, and then they have these dreams. I'm not going to talk specifically about the dreams, but they tell their dreams. Joseph interprets them. He says to the baker, he says to the cupbearer, this dream means that you're going to be restored back to your position, and when you are, please remember me. Now I'm thinking, he's like, okay, high status. Maybe I can be his slave instead of here in the dungeon. Okay, God's going to do this to get me out. Again, Jeff's speculating. It's not in the Bible. And then the baker has this dream, and he says, that means you're going to die. So, don't worry about it. You can't help me. So then it happens exactly as he says. The cupbearer goes back to Pharaoh's staff and forgets Joseph for 2 more years. Until Pharaoh has a dream. And this is kind of the big turning point in the story. Pharaoh has this dream, and nobody can interpret it. Like his court wizards and magicians, and they're all going, I don't know what that means. I don't know what that, do you know what that, no. Nobody knows what it means. And the cupbearer goes, oh yeah, I know a guy. So they go out to the dungeon, pull out Joseph, shave him, clean him up, cut his hair, put him in a nice robe, and take him into Pharaoh. And Pharaoh interprets this dream, and this is one of the things, as I say, key turning point. The interesting thing about this, one of the interesting things about Joseph, see, in these 13 years, Joseph has turned into a new man. So whatever he was as a kid, 13 years of serving, working hard, rising through the ranks, facing disappointment, has turned him into something he never would have been if he had stayed in that environment, right? He probably would have been a really obnoxious adult if he hadn't been removed from there. But in the midst of disappointment, hard work, slavery, more disappointment, being forgotten, being on the bottom of the totem pole, he transformed into a real man of God. Because when he goes into Pharaoh's court, Pharaoh says, hey, I hear you can interpret dreams. And he says, I can't, but I know a God who can. It's the same thing he told the cupbearer and the baker. It's like, I can't do this, but God can. So somehow his mindset has transformed into trusting God. And we'll see more of how he's transformed as we go along. But this dream there's Pharaoh's dream, 7 fat cattle just glowing with health, and they're all up on the banks, and then 7 emaciated cattle come out and consume those, and they disappear. Repeats, next dream is 7 stalks of wheat, same thing, lush, full, rich wheat, and then 7 withered stalks of wheat come up and it consumed those. And Joseph says to Pharaoh, well, God's given you 2 dreams that have the same meaning, first of all. The 7 is 7 years. There's going to be 7 years of plenty. That's this harvest time here. There's going to be 7 years of plenty, and it's going to be abundant. It's going to be rich. Life is going to be great. And then there's going to be 7 years of famine that are going to be so bad that they will completely consume everything that came before it, and it'll totally be forgotten. So he ends up telling Pharaoh, you need to find somebody who can administer the kingdom and take care of it in a way that you preserve what's given in these first 7 years so that it lasts through the next 7 years. And as a result, Pharaoh says, I think you're the man. So in one miraculous day, Joseph goes from the lowest of the low with no hope, no future, no possible way of buying himself out of slavery to the second most powerful man in the most powerful nation of the ancient world. Only God can do that. Like if you wrote that in a novel, people would go, whatever. It doesn't happen that way, right? That's just impossible. That's no, too much coincidence. And yet that's exactly what happens. So I call him prime minister. One version calls him governor. I like prime minister because, England has a prime minister and a king, so it kind of fits the model. And then, in the middle of this famine, Joseph is now running the country. He's taken the tax on the wheat, which had to be cheap, right? Because anybody who's in agriculture knows once you have a ton of some particular crop, it becomes really cheap for a while. So he's buying it up, taking it from all over the land. Everybody's like, sure, take it. I've got way more than I need. So he stores it up, and then when the famine hits, people need wheat, he's got it. It's available. He can start to help people as the leader of the nation. And then people from surrounding nations hear, oh, there's wheat in Egypt, and they come. And then his brothers come. This is where it really gets interesting, because Joseph recognizes his brothers, of course. They don't recognize him because he looks like any other Egyptian. He's got the gear and the makeup and the whatever that he looks Egyptian. So they're bowing down to him, and he's like, okay. And he starts this series of events, dealings with them. It takes up 4 chapters. So he says, well, okay, I'll sell you wheat. Well, first he says, oh, you guys are spies. How do I know this? Well, you say you have another brother, but it's only 10 of you that came. Where's this little brother you're talking about? What about your dad? Nobody's here. Why are you here? They say, no. We're really just here for the wheat. Trust us. And he says, okay, I'm going to trust you now. I'm going to sell you wheat, but don't come back unless you bring that little brother you're talking about, and then I'll know that you're not really spies. Well, I go down the road, they go home, and it's like, wait, our money is back in our bags. And they're like, oh no, something happened. What are we doing? And then they come back and they have this whole exchange with Jacob, and Jacob says, no way you're taking my youngest. I mean, Joseph's dead. You're not taking Benjamin. No way. And they finally persuade him because they start starving because they run out of food. And they finally say, so Judah, it's interesting, Judah steps up and says, Father, I guarantee I will take care of him. Right? This is the brother who came up with the idea of selling his brother into slavery. Now he's saying, no, Father, I will guarantee on my oath, I'm going to take care of Benjamin. So they go to Joseph. Same thing. They still don't know this is their brother, right? He's the governor of Egypt. He's the prime minister. We got to go to him in order to get this wheat, in order to save our lives. And again, Joseph is messing with it. And this part of the story always bugged me. Like, why is he doing this? Talk about that in a second. But he goes to this thing, he says, okay, I'll give you the wheat now that I met the brother. But then he puts his personal cup in the sack, in Benjamin's sack, and they send him down the road, and then the soldiers come after them and say, hey, you stole something. They take it, and they find it in Benjamin's sack, and they take them all back. And then Judah steps up. And again, I was saying, why was he doing this? And one commentator said, he was testing his brothers. Are they still the same people who sold him into slavery? Are they still the same guys who were willing to throw their brother down in order to secure their own convenience and secure their own inheritance, right? And the interesting thing is when he says, okay, guys, Benjamin was the one who stole my cup, so he's going to stay here, and the rest of you can go back to your father. And Judah steps up and says, no, I promised my father I would take care of my brother. Take me, put me in prison, do whatever you want. I'll be your slave, but let him go. And in that moment, Joseph knows his brother's really a different man. Now, this has been 22 years later. God's done whatever he's done in Judah, but Judah's a different man. Because of that, Joseph reveals himself now to his brothers and says, okay, it's actually me. I'm your brother. And of course, they're terrified at that point. It's like, oh my gosh. The guy we sold into slavery is now the most powerful man in the world. This is not a good situation for them. But Jacob and the whole family, everybody now comes to Egypt. Joseph takes care of them, provides for them. I'm going to skip one piece of the story. We'll get to it later. And they live in Egypt until Jacob dies. Actually, they live in Egypt now for generations. But Jacob dies at the age of 147. At that point, Joseph is effectively the patriarch of the family. He has gone from the youngest brother, the youngest brat, to now he's the patriarch, and he's the one they all look to for leadership because God has done something in him. Like I said, those 13 years shaped him and formed him into somebody he never would have been if that hadn't happened. So now as I went through the story, as I was rereading it, there's some lessons that I felt like, Lord, just themes the Lord pulled out, and we're going to talk about those. So let's go ahead and go. First of all, hard circumstances happen, right? I mean, sometimes things come in your life that shake up your life, and it just looks impossible. But those hard circumstances, getting lost in my notes. Sometimes those hard circumstances are God's mercy to prevent something worse. What would Joseph have been if he had stayed there? What would have happened to their family if that famine had happened without Joseph being in Egypt? What would have happened? We look at, I think about that toxic environment he grew up in, favoritism and conniving and manipulating and all of those things. And God put him in a situation that just ground all of that out of him. He became somebody different. And that was God's mercy. That was God's mercy that changed him. And oh, by the way, his brothers started by trying to control him, right? Are there people in your life who try to control you? Sometimes that happens in a toxic environment. Sometimes it's better to just be out of it. But there's this thing in human nature, right? We try to control, we try to manipulate, make this happen, make that happen. And God will work in us to, one, learn how to stand up for ourselves, because at the end of the story, nobody's making Joseph do anything, and how not to manipulate. So, I think the really interesting thing at the very end, when their father dies, the brothers come to him, they lie again. They say, oh, Dad said, just you need to forgive us. And he's like, don't worry about it. And we see this next verse. It says, you intended to harm me. This is Genesis 50, after Jacob has died. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. His perspective has shifted. Again, he's a different man because he sees things differently and he sees God. And as we get closer to God, our perspective on difficulty and suffering changes. And it's not because those things become easy, right? It's never easy. Hardship is hard. We call it hardship for a reason. It's hard. But I'll just read one of these. Dear friends, this is Peter, right? Peter went through some stuff too. Do not be surprised. Do not be surprised at the fiery ordeal that has come on you to test you, as though something strange were happening to you. But rejoice, inasmuch as you participate in the sufferings of Christ. He suffered. Why? Joy set before him. We can suffer because God is working through us. God is working in us. Rejoice inasmuch as you participate in the sufferings of Christ, so that you may be overjoyed when his glory is revealed. If you are insulted because of the name of Christ, you are blessed, for the Spirit of glory and of God rests on you. It's a different perspective. And, so many, as I looked up, so many New Testament verses, like Joseph foreshadowed so much of stuff that is written in the New Testament just by the way he lived. How did he do that? Well, I'm pretty sure he got really, really, really close to God as a slave in the dungeon, in those circumstances, because how could he have had hope in the midst of that? It could only be God. Another lesson. When you work to make other people successful, God will make you successful. Weeks ago or a month ago, whenever it was, I talked about sowing and reaping. And this was a lesson God worked into my heart in the workplace. He showed me very clearly, my job is to make my boss a success. And as I worked to make my boss a success, somehow, magically, I became a success. God's favor was on me. Why? Because I was sowing in to make somebody else's success. And as I became a team lead and I worked to make people around me successful, again, I became more successful. So it doesn't matter who is around you, or even if you are the boss. If you're working to make your people successful, you're just going to be a success. And we see this in Joseph's life, Genesis 39. When his master saw that the Lord was with him and the Lord gave him success in everything, this is the first one before he was thrown in the dungeon, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything he owned. So at the very end, so Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. Around his household, Joseph took care of it. He came home, he ate, and he was freed up then to do his job, his real job as captain of the guard, right? He didn't worry about the household because Joseph was in charge. What's interesting about this is what Joseph doesn't do, right? We see that he works hard. What he doesn't do, it's a family trait, right? He doesn't manipulate. He doesn't connive. This is like what his father's done, his brothers have done. This is like the life he grew up in. He doesn't try to manipulate his way out of it. He serves. He doesn't complain about it, at least that we see. A few generations later, as the children of Israel, his descendants, leave Egypt, what do they do? Oh, they complain. A lot. So much so that God gets fed up with them. That's a lot of complaining. He doesn't despair. Somehow, even in the midst of the dungeon, as a slave in the dungeon, he doesn't despair. He doesn't lose hope. He doesn't rebel. I mean, we like the story of Gladiator or Spartacus, right? The slave who rebels and builds a rebellion and goes against Rome and all of this. He doesn't do that. He doesn't rebel. He doesn't try to turn it over on its head. He doesn't take it into his own hands. He serves. Oh, and by the way, I added this afterwards. He doesn't have a bad attitude. He doesn't half-heartedly do the job. He doesn't go, okay, well, Potiphar's not around. I'm just going to kick back until I hear him coming. Go check some things online, check my Twitter feed. It's like he doesn't do that, right? He works. He works hard. He does his job well. And because he does all of that well, because he doesn't do those things. Now, if you were a slave, let me turn that around. If I were a slave, I would do at least one, probably two, maybe three of those, maybe all of them. I would not be a good slave, okay? This is just Jeff. If I went from being where I am now to suddenly I'm a slave, Jeff's going to have a bad attitude. I suspect some other people in the room might do the same. I mean, just saying. I don't know. Some of you are way more godly than me. Jacob, you're way more godly than me, right? You're going to have a good attitude. You're going to respond well. Yeah, see, our human tendency is not what Joseph did. Our human tendency is, look at me, poor me. I'm gonna do the minimum I can do. I'm gonna weasel my way. I'm gonna figure this out. Our human tendency is not what God calls us to be. And just so we see it again, next time, he's falsely accused. Now he's in the dungeon. If there was any time to have a bad attitude, it would be then. But while Joseph was there in prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness, granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put Joseph in charge. Repeats the story. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care because the Lord was with him and gave him success in whatever he did. God was with him. He submitted himself to God. And we see this. There's several things in the New Testament, right? Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters. Oh, God is watching what you do on the job. Maybe you ought to do it so that he approves, not what your boss sees. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up. Oh, if you work to make people a success, God will make you a success. If I work because it's what God has given me to do, then God will be in it. And I don't have to try to make it work. And just in case you're going, oh, but you don't know my boss. Well, I've had that kind of boss. Just saying. The one who in the group meeting said, oh yeah, look at Jeff's code. See, he made this mistake and he does this and that caused that bug and that's why we had that problem. Yeah, I had that boss, okay? Yeah, it was encouraging. I did not respond the way Joseph did. Just being honest, being real. But, slaves, 1 Peter 2. In reverent fear of God, submit yourselves to your masters, not only to those who are good and considerate, but also to those who are harsh. So if you're using your boss's behavior as an excuse to get out of it, the Bible's already ahead of you. God thought of this like 2,000 years ago. So you don't get that one. Another lesson, beating that horse. Famines happen. They just come. We have them different names: economic downturns, layoffs, inflation. Famines happen. And I started looking up how many times in the Old Testament there was a famine in the land. How many of you remember reading that in the Bible? There was a famine in the land. Famines happen. Even when you're doing God's will, you can end up in the middle of a famine. The really interesting thing is that God knows it's coming. And if you trust him, he sent Joseph ahead of the whole family to save the entire family. Oh, and by the way, the nation of Egypt. If there's a famine coming, God already knows about it. He's already provided for it. He's already set you up for success in the middle of it. If you respond the way he says. When there's that economic downturn, are you going to complain about it? Are you going to try to weasel your way out of it? Can I figure out? Or are you going to go, okay, God, what do I do now? How do I serve the people around me? Oh, and by the way Joseph handled this, he prepared for it. He set aside the wheat. They didn't waste all of that. Sometimes you just need to learn good financial management and set some money aside so that when the next famine comes, not if, when the next famine comes, you're ready for it. Ask God, what do I do? How do I handle this? How do I prepare for this? Because famines happen. And I look, it says, when the famine had spread over the whole country, Joseph opened up all the storehouses, 7 years of storehousing grain. And he sold it to the Egyptians, for this famine was severe throughout Egypt. And all the world came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph, because the famine was severe everywhere. And then he answers his brothers, right? When they come and he finally reveals himself to them, and they're going, oh, no. Oh, crap. The one we sold into slavery is now prime minister. And they're like flat on their faces, right? Like, sorry, please forgive us. He said, God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives. So in his mind already, it's not like you sold me into slavery, but God sent me ahead. Oh, yeah. That's a perspective shift. So then, it was not you who sent me here, but God. He made me father to Pharaoh, lord of his entire household, and ruler of all Egypt. God did that. So, yeah, you did something despicable, but God was actually working in the middle of all of that. And it's in my verses here, Matthew 6:33, right? In that passage that Vanessa read when she was talking about giving. Yeah. Pagans run after all that stuff. Food, houses, clothing. God knows you need it. He does. And he'll provide it. Just serve him. The last thing, I'm running over time. You should probably be used to that by now. Me, not other people. Nobody else here. Because I do that. I am so fired. The way you treat people when you have authority and influence over them is a key test of your character. So I kind of skipped over one chunk of the story. It's in Genesis 47. We're just going to read that. Because what happens when he opens up the storehouses, the Egyptians, 47:13, there was no food in the whole region because the famine was severe. Both Egypt and Canaan wasted away because of the famine. The Egyptians come to him, and they use up all their money buying grain. Next year, yeah, please, worship team, come on up. I'm like, anyway. So they come to him, they give him all their money, he's got all their money, then they go, well, we don't have this, so we'll give you our livestock. So they sell their livestock, and then they come back, and finally they come to this. They've given everything they have. Genesis 47:19. Why should we perish before your eyes, we and our land as well? Buy us and our land in exchange for food, and we with our land will be in bondage to Pharaoh. Give us seed so that we may live and not die, and that the land may not become desolate. So Joseph bought all the land in Egypt for Pharaoh. The Egyptians, one and all, sold their fields because the famine was too severe. The land became Pharaoh's, and Joseph reduced the people to servitude from one end of Egypt to the other. And this one bugs me. I'll be honest. Joseph, the former slave, makes slaves of the entire nation. And I don't think there's any way to sugarcoat this, right? The Bible, the one thing the Bible does not do is spare its heroes, right? If they screw up, they screw up. And I think Joseph does something here that sets the tone. A later Pharaoh, at the beginning of Exodus, it says there was a new Pharaoh and he forgot all that they owed Israel. And I wonder where that Pharaoh got the idea to enslave an entire nation. Ugh. Could it have been Joseph? Functionally, this means what it meant was that nobody owned any land anymore. Pharaoh owned it all. It meant that everybody who worked, what Joseph did was he said, okay, 20% of everything you grow now belongs to Pharaoh. And they collected year after year, 20%. By the way, I did go on a Google trail. As far as anybody can tell, this is the first example of an income tax in antiquity. So next April, when you're paying your taxes, thank you, Joseph. Good idea. So to a degree, he became the oppressor. That doesn't sit well with me because it's like, what was going on here? And so to another degree, we can spiritualize this, and some people do. I read a lot of commentary trying to figure this one out. What I concluded from that is no matter what point I want to make, I can find a commentator who made it somewhere. It's like it's all over the place, literally. I'm just going to sit back and say, I think this was Joseph's big mistake. He got so many things right. He got so many things right, and he had a good attitude, and he forgave his brothers, and he saw God's purpose in it, but he, to a degree, became the oppressor. And these people then didn't own their land anymore. They had to serve Pharaoh. They could work the land, but then they owed it all to Pharaoh. So he took 20% of it. All of us, at some point in our life, will have power over others. If you're a boss, business owner, as a parent, you have authority over other people. Treat them well. Look for do what's good for their benefit, not yours. Don't try to, don't oppress people. Yes, just say it that way, right? There's verses all over the place, right? There's this story in Nehemiah where the governors are oppressing people, and Nehemiah just takes them to task, makes them swear not to do that. Colossians 4, right? Provide for your slaves what is right and fair, because you know that you also have a master in heaven. We have a God in heaven who's watching over us. So, various lessons from the life of Joseph. I kind of sum them up this way. I realized last night that, I should probably put a conclusion slide together. I don't know. Some people do that. Humble yourself. Work hard. Trust God. Be kind. I mean, really, if you live like that, people around you notice. And I, like a lot of us, I spent way too much time that I should have been preparing watching tributes to Charlie Kirk. He lived like that. And people notice. It makes a difference in the world. It changes people around you. And yesterday I was talking to Vanessa. We just started preaching like Joseph this, and that's so cool, and so many things he did. And Vanessa had just kind of tied it all together. And so I just kind of want you to share what you shared, if you would. Because I think that really closes up a lot of this. Live this way. Learn from what Joseph, from his successes and from his mistakes. And let God work in you and make you into the kind of person who changes the world.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Jeff. We were just talking about the hardships in life and what we're supposed to do with those. And like he said, it comes and it goes, and we are always promised hardships in life. And we were talking about Joseph's mindset and how he had to shift towards the Lord. And it's so hard to have an eternal perspective on things when we know we're one life, and trying to understand that our one life can truly affect so many people, and that God is multifaceted, and what we feel is one hardship is actually something so beautiful, because he's creating things inside of us that we could not have had we not gone through that. Joseph wouldn't be in that position had he stayed with his brothers. And the mindset that he had, that it wasn't you who did this, but it was God who did this. What the enemy meant for harm, the Lord can use that for our benefit. And there's so many scriptures in the Word that talks about this. And I just want to read this over us, because I believe the Lord wants to ask us to have a heart and a mind shift. Romans 8:28. And we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him. Everyone who loves him, he works it out for you. In Romans 8:18, it says, I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. The other one that is really, it's became my life verse when we were dealing with my husband's health issues and being in moments where I didn't know if I'd have a husband in a week or not. And I really had to press in and say, Lord, what are you doing? Because it doesn't feel like you're here. As Joseph felt forgotten in the dungeon, in the darkest place of society, he was left there because the cupbearer forgot him. And I would go to this every time, and it was like, consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters. This is James 1. When you face trials of many kinds, joy. Consider it pure joy. And it's hard to wrap our minds. Why would we be so joyful in the midst of having hardship? But it says to consider it so. Why? Because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may mature and complete and not lacking anything. And it goes on to say that if you need wisdom, you can ask him and he gives it generously. And so I feel like this is that moment where if you're going through something hard or there's something that you don't understand, why is this happening, Lord? No, the question, what are you doing inside of me? Because if we know what he's developing inside of us through this hardship, then we can partner with him in that and see what it talks about when it's like the glory is not worth comparing to the suffering. There is a lot going on in our world right now. A lot. And there's a lot we don't understand. But God knows. And he knows that even though Joseph was in the dungeon, he already knew, but I have him to raise up. I have a purpose for his life. Because everyone could have said, why would you do that, God? Why would you allow that to happen? And yet God's going, hey, I know what I'm doing. Because there's something inside there that needed to come out. And I need you to trust me. And it's our job to lay back and know that he's God. He's in control of our lives. He knows the end of the story. He knows what he's doing inside of us. He knows how he's cutting and sharpening off and sanding off the edges. He knows how he's shining us for the moment that we were created for the lives to impact around us. So if we can just bow our heads and I'll just pray over us. Lord, I just thank you so much. I want to come into the position of thanking you for the trials in our lives. If Jesus did not go through what he went through, and he didn't have the eternal perspective, then he would have given up. Because the amount of pain he endured would have made any human give up. But he was going to finish what he started. And he knew what he was signing up for. He said, Father, take this cup from me. But then he knew his job and his role. And on the cross, he said, it is finished. And he knew that his sacrifice would continue thousands and thousands of years, millions and millions of people. Would he do it again? I'd say absolutely. I can look back at hardships again and see how God worked inside of me, and if it meant that I could help one person, I'd do it again. Women have this beautiful ability to birth a child and go through so much intense pain and see the beauty that comes out at the other end and says, I think I could do this again. Because the glory outweighs the suffering. So Lord, I just pray over us that as we're facing hardship, and if that's you, With everyone's heads bowed, eyes closed, if that's you, would you just raise your hand if you find your place in that place of hardship or needing understanding of what's going on in the world or in your life? I just want to pray over you guys. Lord, we just pray right now that you would give them wisdom. Give them eyes to see what you're doing in the circumstance, eyes to see what you're doing in our world. Give them ears to hear your words and your heart. God, let us press into you more than we ever had before. Lord, thank you for your wisdom that finds no fault. Thank you for giving it so generously. Lord, as soon as we have that heart shift and that perspective shift, we'll watch the circumstances start to move with it. Because that's what he's going after, is your heart and your mind and your will to serve him. And when we do that, all of a sudden, it's not your brothers that threw you into slavery. It is God who put you there to save them. So Lord, help us have that servant's mentality of just here to serve you, God, here to serve you. I love how the Bible says we don't work for man, but we work for him. It says to treat others as we want to be treated. Love others as you do yourself. It becomes a lot easier when we have God's perspective, when facing the challenges in relationships, in our work, in our home. And so, Lord, help us shift our minds. In Jesus' name, amen. So I'm just going to ask the prayer team to come up. The prayer team is here for you if you need prayer. If you need encouragement, the word says where two or more are gathered in my name, it shall be done. And sometimes that's what we need, is just someone to come alongside you and say, I hear you. I see what your prayer request is, and I want to partner with you in that so that we can stand together firmly on the belief that we will see breakthrough for you, that we will see healing in you, that we will see a shift in your perspective and your understanding. And so we just bless you guys. Thank you so much for coming. Be blessed and enjoy the presence of the Lord that's just on all of us right now. Thank you guys.